Her life was a legend. A fairy tale wedding that turned into a nightmare of infidelity and mental health struggles, ending in a tragic high-speed paparazzi chase. This is the story of Diana, Princess of Wales. Despite being loved by everyone else, she could never win the heart of her husband. What went wrong? Who was the third person? His cousin, King George V of the UK, stepped in and sent a warship to save him. So, at just 18 months old, Philip was stuffed into an orange crate and whisked away on an exile adventure. In a later interview, when asked what language they spoke at home, he paused and asked, "What do you mean by at home?"
There was actually a woman behind her who controlled everything. It was her mother, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. In the hearts of the British, she is a national grandmother who lived to 101. If you have ever seen her on the news footage, she always wore a pink or blue suit, wearing exaggerated hats, waving her hand on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, smiling kindly. But do you actually believe that?
She couldn't eat alone, walk alone, or even take a bath or write in her diary without somebody breathing down her neck. The second she got that crown, she stopped being the quiet girl and went full boss mode. She kicked them both out of the palace immediately. Elizabeth wanted to take part. In February 1945, she joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service, known as the ATS. The war gave Elizabeth a lesson no palace education could fully provide. Symbolism becomes stronger when it is connected to visible work. You know that feeling when you're just hungry? Well, Queen Victoria, the grandmother of Europe, was starving. We're talking keeping her husband up all night until he's physically drained kind of hungry. And after he passed, she didn't slow down. She moved on to a buff Indian servant and basically entered her forbidden romance era. Plus, with all those kids, she low-key left a curse on Europe that literally triggered World War I. Most people see the Victorian era as the peak of the British Empire, but behind the scenes, it was giving major toxic vibes. Child labor, zero hygiene, and a massive drug problem. So, was Queen Victoria's reign a blessing or a total disaster for her people? And what kind of drama did she get into that even a Netflix show wouldn't dare to write? Let's dive in. When you hear Queen Victoria, you probably imagine a girl born with a literal silver spoon in her mouth, living that main character life in a palace. And yeah, she was rich, but her childhood? Absolute nightmare fuel. Born May 24th, 1819 at Kensington Palace, Alexandrina Victoria was the only child of Prince Edward. Her royal status was complicated. Her dad was only the fourth son of the king, so her chances of actually sitting on the throne were slim to none. It was a total long shot. To make matters worse, her dad, her only real claim to the throne, died when she was just 1 year old. This left Victoria and her mom, aka the Duchess of Kent, in a super awkward spot at court. But her mom wasn't about to let that bag slip. She teamed up with her shady as hell comptroller, Sir John Conroy, to secure their power. They built a literal wall of surveillance around little Victoria. They called it protection, but everyone knew the Duchess was just using Victoria's royal blood to clout chase and stay relevant after her husband died. They call this the Kensington system, but I call it the no privacy ever method. The core idea, keep Victoria on a leash. Constant surveillance 24/7. She couldn't eat alone, walk alone, or even take a bath or write in her diary without somebody breathing down her neck. Want to hang out with friends? Denied. Every single person she met had to be pre-approved by Conroy. It's like having a creepy uncle vet all your Instagram followers. For young Victoria, this was totally suffocating and made her trust no one. And Conroy, total creep. He was out here using major, toxic, gaslighting, manipulation tactics. Whenever she felt sick, he'd be like, "Oh, you're so weak and helpless, only your mom and I could truly care about you. No one else knows what's best for you, not even yourself." Little Victoria actually believed this for a while, actually. feeling like she was nothing without them. But as she grew up, she realized the only useless ones were the two adults clinging to her like leeches. But Conroy's ambition was wild. He wanted to be the power behind the throne. As Victoria moved up the line of succession, he was practically foaming at the mouth. He even tried to trick her into signing a document making him regent while the king was dying. Luckily, Victoria had some loyal maids who blocked his dusty hands and kept her power intact. In 1837, King William IV passed away, and 18-year-old Victoria became queen. Even though the court was crawling with Conroy's goons, the second she got that crown, she stopped being the quiet girl and went full boss mode. She kicked them both out of the palace immediately. It was a total mic drop moment. All the adults who looked down on her were shook. The Victorian era had officially begun. So, what's the first thing you do when you become queen? Fix the country? Nah, that's for NPCs. Our girl's Victoria, first order of business was shooting her shot with her first cousin, Prince Albert. The most romantic love story of her life started in 1836. Back then, she wasn't queen yet, and Albert wasn't exactly the snack he later become. They were introduced for a political marriage, and Victoria's first impression was basically meh. She wrote in her diary that he was amiable and intelligent, standard friend zone talk. But 3 years later, after she took the throne, their second meeting was a total game changer. Talk about a glow up. Albert had grown up and Victoria was down bad. Her diary entry that night was basically a fanfic. She wrote, "He is extremely handsome, his hair is about the same color as mine, and his eyes are large and blue, and he has a beautiful nose and very sweet mouth with fine teeth." In modern terms, he's a literal 10 out of 10. I'm obsessed. I'm spiraling. And as queen, she wasn't waiting around. She manufactured accidental run-ins, invited him for walks, music, and art, basically letting the whole world know, this one's mine. Since she was the monarch, royal rules meant she had to propose. And Victoria, zero hesitation. On October 15th, 1839, just 5 days into his visit, she popped the question. Albert said yes immediately. No playing hard to get here. Victoria, the diary queen, wrote, "We embraced each other over and over again. My heart was so full." 4 months later, they had a massive royal wedding. Victoria went all out. While other royal brides were wearing every color of the rainbow, Victoria went anti-trend and chose a stunning, pure white gown. She basically invented the white wedding aesthetic that we're still obsessed with today. On her wedding night, she was on cloud 9. She wrote, "I never spent such an evening. My dearest, dear Albert. His excessive love and affection gave me feelings of heavenly love and happiness I never could have hoped to have felt before. Basically, I'm obsessed. I'm finished. He's the one." But not everyone was a fan. Albert was royal, but he was broke royal. Haters were calling him a gold digger and a trophy husband. The hate only stopped when someone tried to assassinate the queen, and Albert literally jumped in front of her to block the bullet. That's when the public finally realized, okay, he's the real one. He's got her back. So, was that Prince Charming romance sweet enough to give you a cavity? Well, hold on to your seat, because this story hasn't even hit climax yet. On their wedding night, Victoria didn't sleep a single wink. She was so hyped, she could barely stand it. Curious about what went down? Let's pull out the Queen's Diary, which is basically the 19th century version of a burn book, but for tea. She wrote in vivid detail about how they were, well, completely unfiltered with each other and how they made each other happy. It's pretty spicy stuff, but since we're trying to avoid getting age restricted here, I'll let you use your imagination. We're all adults, right? Alright, no need to make a scene. The queen was down bad for her husband. For the first few days of marriage, they barely left the bed. At night, it was constant no sleep vibe. She adored him with a level of passion she couldn't even put into words. We did not sleep much. Albert was so dear and affectionate. How I adore and love him, I cannot say. And And the thirst in her diary when he'd come back from a trip, it was next level. She wrote, "My dear Albert, he looked so handsome in his white cashmere breeches with nothing on underneath." She specifically noted he had nothing under those pants. You know exactly what she was looking at, don't you? Luckily, Victoria's fire wasn't met with a cold shoulder. Albert was totally here for the high-level play. He caught every ball she threw. He'd buy her sexy black silk stockings or set the mood with intense rose perfumes. They did everything they could do, and probably some things they shouldn't. It got to the point where Albert was physically drained. He'd be like, "Babe, I'm exhausted. Can we just cuddle tonight?" And Victoria would actually get a little salty about this. But their love wasn't just kept behind closed doors. In public, they'd go for carriage rides and decorate Christmas trees together. He was never that guy who'd ghost her and text back 3 hours later like, "Sorry, babe, I fell asleep." The coolest thing about Albert? He decided to be a tradition-breaking prince consort in that super conservative era, a royal husband in the delivery room, unheard of. But Albert didn't just stay for the birth. He held Victoria's hand the entire time. Later, during another birth, he felt so bad for her pain that he brought in Dr. John Snow to administer chloroform. He basically became a key pioneer for painless childbirth. Don't sleep on how big of a deal that was. Back then, society thought pregnancy was original sin, so labor pain was seen as punishment for women. Using outside help like anesthesia, that was seen as cheating and disrespectful to God. Sounds wild now, right? But people really believed it. Thankfully, the Queen used her own platform to promote it, and the shocking stigma finally faded. This power couple had 9 kids, but plot twist, Victoria actually hated being a mom. She loathed breastfeeding, said it was disgusting, and she was super annoyed that doctors told her to reduce her activity, aka less bedroom cardio, please, while pregnant. She was not having it. So now you know the secret to their marriage. Sadly, their happily ever after only lasted 17 years before Albert got sick and passed away. For Victoria, it was like her heart died with him. For the next 40 years, she entered her mourning era wearing black every single day and ghosting almost all social events. She even kept Albert's room exactly as it was. Servants had to change his pajamas and make the bed every day, as if he were going to walk in any second, into every royal house in Europe, giving her the title Grandmother of Europe, which I guess means her and Albert's love officially went viral through history. Seriously, was fate just not looking? How do you have 2 endgame people and then just one of them leaves the chat? I'm about to stop believing in love. But wait, like I always say, don't go yet. I haven't finished the story. Victoria outlived Albert by 40 years. When her husband finished his turn, she was just getting started. She was a senior player in the game of love, and she was thriving. Her first rebound? Albert's former Scottish servant, John Brown. After Albert passed, he was moved to the Queen's side to accompany her on walks, chats, and rides, and eventually he was doing other things Albert used to do too. And Brown was not like the gentle Albert. Even though he was a servant, he acted like a straight-up alpha CEO. He'd constantly tell the Queen her outfits were ugly. He just bluntly said, "Stop complaining. I can't just build you a new one." Another time, while helping her into her cloak, she was standing all crooked and he just coldly said, "Woman, you're just playing with fire." Whoa! Who dares talk to the Queen of England like that? Well, surprise, the Queen loved it. Albert was great, but Brown gave her a whole new kind of thrill because no one in her life had ever dared to talk back to her. Brown felt so much more real than those gaslighting, silver-tongued nobles. Plus, Victoria's romances always needed a hero saves the beauty moment. Albert blocked a bullet for her, and now Brown had his just heard. Victoria was in a carriage accident and Brown literally pulled her out with his bare hands. Legend has it, he carried her away in a Princess Carry. It was so cinematic, even Netflix script couldn't write it better. Their relationship was so sus that the court couldn't stop gossiping. Some salty officials even called her Mrs. Brown, and the rumors spread that they had secretly eloped. While we don't know for sure if they hitched, we know she was obsessed with him. After Brown died, she kept his belongings and even built a monument for him. What exactly were they commemorating? I'll leave that up to you. Surprise! The story still isn't over. After Brown passed, Victoria met an Indian attendant, Abdul Karim. Originally, he was just sent to the UK to be a cook, but the Queen took one look at him and it was a glow-up moment. She turned him from a servant into her munshi and spiritual advisor, moving him into Windsor Castle. In an era of peak racism, seeing Karim from a colony getting land, honors, and medals, the rest of the royal family was absolutely losing their minds. But the Queen didn't give a single, well, she didn't care. She spent every day with Karim learning Urdu, talking about Indian culture and discussing colonial policy. She was constantly bragging about how smart her Karim was. Naturally, the rumors started flying again, and they were even more toxic. Because of their 44-year age gap, people started calling it a mother-son romance. Totally out of pocket. To protect him, Victoria named Karim as a principal mourner for her funeral, a special honor usually reserved for the monarch's inner circle and family. Basically, she considered him family. One big happy family, right? But Victoria underestimated how much everyone hated him. The second she passed away, every single letter and item related to him was immediately destroyed, and he was literally kicked out of the country. Honestly, that's a major guilty conscious behavior from the family. The more they tried to erase his existence, the more it just proves how much he meant to her. By now, do you realize how stubborn the Queen was, right? If she wants it, no one stops her. Same energy if she doesn't want it, even in politics. Take women's rights, for example. Don't think for a second that a woman wouldn't gatekeep other women. Even though she was the Queen, she believed women should stay in their wife and mom era and shouldn't have the right to vote. When women wrote to her with petitions, she shut them down without hesitation, calling the movement mad, wicked folly. It made a lot of legendary feminists of the time super salty. They didn't expect the biggest blow to come from the Queen herself. The patriarchy really had a grip on her. Did someone say good mom? Let's check her track record. She and Albert had 9 kids, who then went viral across European royalty, leading to 42 grandkids. But there was a problem. The male heirs started dying off one by one. People literally thought it was a curse. Eventually, scientists did a deep dive and found out they all had a genetic disorder called hemophilia. They checked the royal family tree and found no history of it before Victoria. But due to all that royal intermarrying and gene mutation occurred in the Queen, she passed hemophilia from the UK to Spain to Germany and Russia. The son of the last Russian Tsar, Nicholas, had it, which helped destabilize the whole royal family and fueled the revolution. She literally changed the course of European history through her DNA. And besides hemophilia, the grandmother of Europe gave the world a long, wet kiss, otherwise known as World War I. How? What does World War I have to do with her? It's all about her grandkids. Once they all sat on their respective thrones, things were fine at first, but in the early 20th century, nationalism started peaking, and conflicts between countries got intense. The old rule of don't fight your own relatives turned into beat them until their own grandma wouldn't recognize them. For example, her grandson, George V, was the king of the UK, while another grandson, Wilhelm II, was the German emperor, and Nicholas II of Russia was there too. These 3 cousins grew up together, but when World War I broke out, they were on opposite sides. Wilhelm's expansion policy clashed with George's British interests, and Russia and Germany had major beef. The family alliance Victoria built was literally blown apart by artillery. But let's be fair, Gene mutations and grandkids fighting aren't things the queen could have controlled. So let's look at what she could control. In 1876, Victoria was named Empress of India, despite never actually setting foot on Indian soil. Even though she valued her relationship with India, I mean, she brought Karim into her house as a tutor and maybe more, the reality of colonial rule was still exploitation and control. During her reign, India suffered massive famines that killed millions. Colonial officials didn't help. They actually kept exporting grain back to the UK. It turned a famine into a massacre, and a ton of people still find this part of history disgusting. While the UK saw it as unifying India and bringing railways, medicine, and civilization to South Asia, they called it enlightenment. They basically expected India to say thank you for the blessing, but the good parts were all narrated by the colonizers. No one ever listened to India's voice, and it's not like anyone asked them if they wanted any of it. Even though the queen was doing her own thing in love and annoying her ministers with her views on women, when it came to internal policy, she was a total I'm the main character queen. During her reign, the UK went from an agricultural island to an industrial powerhouse, dominating the globe as the empire on which the sun never sets. How did she pull it off? Vision. As a monarch, she knew exactly where the country needed to go to get stronger. During the Industrial Revolution, she was the #1 cheerleader in the front row. She witnessed railways crossing cities and telegrams connecting the world. In 1851, she personally hosted the Great Exhibition, proving she was a queen who stood science and that Britain would lead the world in the new century. Sounds like a high-energy shonen manga, right? But every shonen manga needs a villain. During this era of rapid growth, the darkest parts were the corners no one wanted to see: pollution, worker exploitation, and child labor. And while the tracks were being laid further and further, the wealth gap between the lower class and the nobility got wider and wider. This wasn't directly her fault, but sadly, she didn't exactly bring everyone along as the country leveled up. Besides, turning the country into an industrial giant, she also rewrote the script for family values. Her romance with Albert, the white wedding dress, the high-profile happy family PR, it brought the royals into the public eye. It made the middle class want to copy them, focusing on family ethics and one man, one woman values. It was the 19th century, and today, one man, or one woman is also great. She was also super into social charity. She backed Florence Nightingale's nursing reforms and donated tons of money to disaster victims, war widows, and orphanages. She didn't just do it herself, she pressured other royals to join in, making noblesse oblige the new standard. Queen Victoria, a life full of controversy and high-key drama, passed away at 81. At the time, she was the second longest reigning monarch in British history. In her final years, she was physically frail and emotionally drained after losing her 3 closest companions, one by one. Despite being queen, she was incredibly lonely. You might wonder, after all those intense relationships, who did she love the most? She gave us the answer herself. In her will, she requested to be buried in the white wedding dress she wore with Albert, covered by his cloak, with their photo in her hand. But she also asked for some of John Brown's belongings to be tucked into her casket too. Talk about keeping it complicated until the very end. Her funeral was massive. Royalty from all over Europe, mostly her own grandkids, showed up. It wasn't just a funeral for a person. It was the end of an era. The Victorian era was a total paradox. Progress versus tradition, wealth versus poverty. Just like Victoria herself, who went from a puppet princess to the grandmother of Europe. Her son, Edward VII, took over, starting the Edwardian era, a short, chaotic transition before the 20th century hit, with wars, revolutions, and modern anxiety. And honestly, none of it would have happened without Queen Victoria.
When it comes to Queen Elizabeth II of England, you must be familiar with her, but you may not know during her long reign of England, there was actually a woman behind her who controlled everything. It was her mother, Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother, in the hearts of the British. She is a national grandmother who lived to 101. If you have ever seen her on news footage, she always wore a pink or blue suit, wearing exaggerated hats, waving her hand on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, smiling kindly. But do you believe that? This seemingly harmless national grandmother was even named by Nazi leader Hitler, named the most dangerous woman in Europe. In her life, people who got in her way were dealt with are countless. To maintain her bloodline, she could coldly put her niece in a mental hospital and let her fend for herself. It was even rumored that she had a crush on her husband's brother, King Edward VIII, but couldn't get him, so she launched a half-century-long revenge on her rival. Today, let's take a look at the kindest grandmother in the royal family, how she stood firm and became the big boss in the power game. Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, who is also our protagonist today. Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother, she was born into a noble family in Scotland. Although she was not a direct member of the royal family, but also from a prominent family, she was a rich lady who never worried about food and clothes. She was lively and cheerful when she was young, and was a party favorite in London's social circle. It is said that she rejected the prince's proposal several times. It was she who rejected the prince, not the prince rejected her. That prince was the second son of King George V, Prince Albert, who later became King George VI. However, although Elizabeth rejected him many times, they still got married in the end. At that time, it was a good marriage. But that was all, because Albert had a brother above him, brother Prince Edward, who was destined to inherit the throne. So, Elizabeth actually married a spare prince. His life script was supposed to be an idle duchess, have a few children, living a rich and peaceful life on the fringes of the monarchy, and become the rich and idle lady that many people dream of. However, fate played a big joke on her. The golden bachelor admired by all British girls, Prince Edward, fell in love with a woman who fascinated him, Wallis Simpson. The problem is that Mrs. Simpson is not only American, but also divorced twice. In Britain in the 1930s, for a king who wanted to be a defender of faith, was absolutely unacceptable. Just imagine, the head of the national church at that time, marrying a woman who had been divorced twice, which is 100 times worse than now. 100 times worse. Edward VIII fell in love and couldn't extricate himself. He declared to the world that, "I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility, and to discharge my duties as king as I would wish to do, without the help and support of the woman I love." To put it simply, it was for love. He could even give up the throne. In 1936, Edward VIII announced his abdication. This romantic story of loving beauty over the country, for Elizabeth, was a disaster that fell from the sky. Her husband, the Albert, who was shy and introverted since childhood, was forced to take on the heavy crown overnight, became George VI, and Elizabeth herself, also changed from a happy and laid-back duchess, was abruptly pushed into a position she never wanted, the Queen of England. It is said that before the coronation ceremony, Elizabeth looked in the mirror, looked at the fine clothes and jewels on her body, but she was not happy at all. She felt that her life was completely ruined by that American woman. What made her even more sad and unforgivable was that her husband was forced to take the crown, suffered from unimaginable pressure, the speech impediment that she had finally overcome. Her health deteriorated rapidly due to extreme anxiety. She could only watch helplessly as her husband be drained of blood by the crown bit by bit, and crushed mercilessly. From that moment on, the seed of hatred took root deeply in her heart. Elizabeth hated Wallis Simpson so much. This hatred, mixed with a strong sense of insecurity of being forced, finally gave birth to the Revenge Queen of the Windsor dynasty. First, she imposed a complete economic blockade. After Edward VIII abdicated, he became the Duke of Windsor, but almost all of his money depended on the royal stipend, and the one who controlled the flow of money was Elizabeth. So, Elizabeth joined her husband, George VI, to strictly control the remittances to the Duke and Duchess. She even threatened that, if they dared to return to the UK, all allowances would be stopped immediately. Then came social isolation. Elizabeth used her vast influence to ensure that the Duke and Duchess of Windsor to be unable to move in the upper European society. She even gave Wallis, the Duchess of Windsor, a humiliating code name called Cookie. At that time, it was also used to refer to a cook, to mock her appearance and commoner background. In Elizabeth's world, Wallis was always that dirty American woman, an intruder who was unworthy of a royal title. She even pressured the government, refusing to give her the title of Her Royal Highness. In this aristocratic world that values titles so much, it was the ultimate public humiliation. Speaking of this sister-in-law war, There was a gossip circulating in the European social circle that when Elizabeth was young, actually had a crush on Prince Edward. She married her younger brother because she couldn't get him. So her hatred for Wallace may have come from jealousy, but things always have a twist. Modern historians, especially the biographer of the Queen Mother, Gareth Russell, after reviewing historical materials, found that the rumor that Elizabeth had a crush on her husband's brother is likely were probably fabricated by Edward and Wallace themselves. The evidence that historians refuted is very direct. First, before Elizabeth got married, she was not familiar with Edward at all. At most, they just nodded and greeted each other, just nodded and said hello. Second, from Elizabeth's private diary at that time, the reason why she rejected George VI's two proposals, it was because she was extremely resistant to marrying into the royal family, for fear of losing her freedom. A woman who didn't want to marry a spare prince, how could she possibly want to marry the future king? Third, the source of this rumor is actually Edward himself. Historians pointed out that, many years after abdicating, Edward witnessed the younger brother and sister-in-law he looked down on, in the hearts of the British people, became more and more sacred and inviolable, while he could only live in exile in France. Out of strong unwillingness and inferiority complex, he began to say that, oh, he targeted Wallace so much, all because she had deeply loved me before. No wonder. The authoritative British historian Andrew Roberts has criticized this statement as absurd and unnecessary, because the feud between the two women are dramatic enough. There is no need to fabricate such low-level gossip. Seeing this, you understand, right? The Duke and Duchess of Windsor tried to portray Elizabeth's behavior as a woman's jealousy of not getting what she wanted. So many people think that Elizabeth's methods against Wallace were harsh, but it was a reasonable revenge. The next thing I'm going to talk about is what Queen Elizabeth is truly terrifying, because she maintained the perfect image of the Windsor dynasty, with cold-blooded methods, are not only aimed at external enemies. When it threatened the family's face, even her own blood relatives could not escape the fate of being erased. On the glorious family tree of the royal family, there are 2 pages were quietly and cruelly torn off. These 2 pages are the Queen Mother's nieces, Nerissa and Catherine. When these 2 sisters were born, suffered from severe congenital intellectual disabilities. In this noble family that values blood purity, it was an unspeakable secret and a huge shame. So, their mother, in order to maintain the family's good genes and perfect bloodline, handed over her daughters secretly in 1941, the Royal Earlswood Asylum on the outskirts of London. What's even more terrifying is that, published in 1963, the authoritative Royal Peerage Yearbook, in the blog Aristocratic Directory, the mother of the sisters personally wrote, the sisters were deceased, to create the illusion that they had passed away, but in fact, they were still alive. From that day on, they disappeared from the world. They stayed in institutions all year round, and were taken care of by nurses and staff, and rarely visited by their families. Later, Queen Elizabeth learned that Nerissa and Catherine were still alive. It is said that she would send about £4,000, about $10 million US, but the money couldn't help them move out of the crowded public ward, nor did it bring her a personal visit. In the humble ward, 2 women wore old clothes donated by others, and ate the most basic meals. They almost forgot their own names. While dozens of kilometers away in Buckingham Palace, their aunt was wearing a dress custom made by the top British designer, Norman Hartnell's custom-made dress, attending one state banquet after another, and received the admiration of the world. The most ironic and heartbreaking scene happened in 1981. That year, Prince Charles and Princess Diana held a wedding of the century. 75 million people watched it on TV. In Epsom Asylum, in the musty public recreation room, a group of patients in ragged clothes also crowded in front of the TV. Among them, there are the long-forgotten Nerissa and Catherine. According to the nurse at the time, when on the TV screen, their Aunt Elizabeth, Queen Mother, and wearing splendid jewels, Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother, appeared on the steps of St. Paul's Cathedral, who could barely recognize anyone, and could barely speak. The sisters suddenly stood up excitedly. They faced the screen, imitated the appearance of the royal family. They curtsied deeply, and tried to wave to the person on the screen. They were paying tribute to the family that sentenced them to death, and the Queen Mother, who was loved by all. Kind-hearted Queen Mother may never have remembered. In the dark corner, there are also 2 close relatives with the same blood, were living a miserable life without even a name. Nerissa died in 1986, at the age of 66. On her grave, there is not even a decent tombstone. There is only a cold number. Catherine lived until 2014. At the age of 87, in the last decades of her life, no royal member ever visited her, although the Queen Mother was not the mastermind who initially decided to send them, but many commentators believe that, for decades after that, neither publicly mentioned it, nor took the initiative to improve their situation. This silence and alienation made it difficult for her to completely distance herself. Logical cold-bloodedness of sacrificing others is like an invisible family curse, was passed down by Queen Elizabeth herself. Eventually, at the wedding of Charles and Diana, it detonated a more widely known tragedy. In the Queen Mother's worldview, the royal family is not a family, but a company. I'm not making this up. It's what the royal family really calls itself. In this company, personal emotions, personal happiness, and even personal love are not important. The only important thing is the company's survival and a perfect image. So, when Diana was on the verge of collapse due to her unhappy marriage, and even bulimia and self-harm, what did the Queen Mother think? She had no sympathy. In her eyes, all of Diana's emotional expressions were all manifestations of weakness, and betrayal was a huge threat to the entire royal system. It is said that in private, even called Diana a troublemaker. So, as Diana's mother-in-law, the Queen Mother, the family's highest spiritual leader, though she did not issue a written ban, she showed a more terrifying method. She took the lead in extreme cold treatment. She turned a blind eye to Diana's pain, ignoring her, and when the head of the family showed this cold attitude, the entire royal family naturally followed suit. Diana was thus isolated in the splendid palace, was completely isolated. What's more deadly is that Queen Mother instilled in Charles since childhood was a set of extremely distorted marriage values. Responsibility always outweighed personal emotions. However, here is a historical myth to clarify. Some people think that the Queen Mother acquiesced in Charles' mistress, but in fact, the Queen Mother hated Charles' mistress Camilla because Camilla was divorced, which reminded the Queen Mother, the American woman who almost destroyed the royal family, Wallis Simpson. Some people think that, until the Queen Mother died in 2002, Charles and Camilla couldn't get married officially. It was because the Queen Mother refused to accept her, since the Queen Mother hated Camilla so much. Then why did Charles dare to have an affair blatantly? For the Queen Mother, loyalty to marriage was not as important as stability and honor. Only Charles could fulfill his duties as the future king. Whoever he has outside, Queen Elizabeth would not say anything. This cold-blooded set of values, it is the survival rules she distilled from the palace fights of her generation. She relied on suppressing all personal emotions to turn herself into a royal machine. Just survived the abdication crisis and struggle, so she took it for granted that all royal members should do the same, which made Charles learned to live a double life with extreme repression. It also pushed the innocent Diana into the abyss of despair. About Queen Elizabeth, there is a very famous legend. During World War II, Nazi leader Hitler once publicly stated that Queen Elizabeth was the most dangerous woman in Europe. Hitler, as a master of mass psychology and political propaganda, he could see at a glance the Queen Mother during World War II, showed in the political drama, was definitely the most dangerous level in Europe. Let's go back to the scene of the London Blitz. When the East End of London was bombed to ruins, the Queen Mother personally inspected the scene. But if you look at those photos carefully, you will find that, among a group of poor people with dusty faces and lost homes, the Queen Mother was wearing a light-colored top silk dress, wearing high heels, perfect 3-layer pearl necklace. At first, the victims were furious. They shushed at the Queen in her fancy dress, even throw trash at her. Facing this kind of a PR crisis that could bring disaster to the royal family, the Queen Mother made an unexpected choice. After Buckingham Palace was also hit by German bombs, she still insisted on staying in London. She said the famous words that "I'm glad we've been bombed. It makes me feel I can look the East End in the face." This black magic of packaging privilege as sacrifice. Instead, it established a close image of being with the people. The public opinion instantly reversed. But why did she do this? The deeper motivation is actually terrifying. Before the outbreak of World War II, British aristocracy actually maintained an ambiguous attitude towards Nazis, especially the abdicated uncle, Edward VIII. Declassified files show that Edward VIII was not only a Nazi sympathizer, but also conspired with German high-level officials. He wanted to restore the monarchy and regain the throne. So, when this shocking scandal might explode at any time and completely destroy the Windsor dynasty, Elizabeth had to show more patriotism than anyone else, more against Germany, put on a show of sympathy and act as if sharing the victim's plight. To whitewash the image of the entire family, she was not only fighting against Hitler, she was fighting against the traitor who had an affair with the Nazis, and she really succeeded. did, she succeeded in making the world believe that the Windsor family, as the beacon of light leading Britain against evil. This is why British media would turn Hitler's statement that into a myth to prove the courage of the Queen Mother. Interestingly, many historians have looked through historical records and can't find an official record of Hitler saying this. There is no mistake. It was probably made up by the British royal family to create a PR copy. The Queen Mother not only used her acting skills, deceived the British at that time, but also used a fake quote perfectly into the pantheon of manipulating history. From whitewashing her family's scandals to consolidating power, the Queen Mother's life can be said to be a series of precise calculations. This calculation continued until the last moment of her life. Even her estate after her death was a decades-long financial operation. It is reported that she left most of her property to his second grandson, Prince Harry. The warm myth that the Queen Mother loved Harry the most spread all over the world, but this was also a carefully designed means. First, this trust fund of £19 million was actually arranged as early as 1994. That is, 8 years before the Queen Mother's death had been arranged, because according to the British law at that time, as long as the donor could live for more than 7 years, this huge sum of money, the inheritance tax of up to 40%, was not required. This old lady relied on her amazing longevity to complete legal tax evasion for her descendants. By the way, this seemingly kind old lady, when she died, left a total debt of £7 million, approximately $10 million, but all the money was spent on expensive horse racing, and tons of top French champagne, and maintaining several castles under her name, and the salaries of hundreds of full-time servants. And this £7 million mess was finally settled by her daughter Elizabeth II, used the royal treasury to quietly clean up the mess. That is to say, the taxpayers still had to pay for it. Of course, she will choose to inherit it to Harry, even more than King William, because William is the heir. In the future, will inherit the super cash cow of over £1 billion, the Duchy of Cornwall. As for Harry, he is just a spare tire. He is destined to be a supporting role always behind his brother, so this extra money is not the love from his great-grandmother, but more likely a consolation prize for not inheriting the throne. A ceiling fee for the spare tire. The Queen Mother is using this money to tell Harry, "This is your life. Take the money and be a quiet supporting role in the royal family." The most ironic ending came decades later. Prince Harry used the money, the spare tire termination fee, resolutely brought his wife Meghan to escape the cold and distorted royal system built by his great-grandmother. He even wrote an autobiography entitled Spare. He used the money left by the Queen Mother to complete his ultimate rebellion against her values.
In 1945, a magazine article in the United States described a disagreement inside the British royal family. Princess Elizabeth, the heir presumptive to the throne, wanted to join the war effort. Her father, King George VI, did not want her to do it. His concern was understandable. Elizabeth was not an ordinary teenager. She was the future queen. Her safety mattered, and her training as a princess was already treated as a national duty. But Britain had been at war since 1939. By the time Elizabeth turned 18 in April 1944, women across the country were already working in factories, on farms, in offices, and in military auxiliary services. The war had changed what service looked like. Elizabeth wanted to take part. In February 1945, she joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service, known as the ATS. That decision made her the first female member of the royal family to become a full-time member of the armed services. This should not be exaggerated. Elizabeth did not fight on the front line. Women in the ATS were not assigned combat role. Her royal position also remained visible. She returned to Windsor Castle at the end of the day instead of living in Barrack. But it was still more than a publicity image. She trained as a driver and mechanic. She studied vehicle maintenance, mechanics theory, map reading, and the handling of heavy army vehicles. For a future queen, that mattered. The war gave Elizabeth a lesson no palace education could fully provide. Symbolism becomes stronger when it is connected to visible work. Elizabeth had already seen that lesson at home. When Britain entered the Second World War on September 3, 1939, King George VI addressed Britain and the Empire by radio. During the Blitz, he and Queen Elizabeth chose not to be seen as hiding from danger. Buckingham Palace was bombed on September 13, 1940. After the attack, Queen Elizabeth was reported by the Imperial War Museum's transcript to have said, "I'm glad that we have been bombed. Now we can look the East End in the eye." That phrase mattered because Londoners in the East End had suffered heavily from German bombing. The royal family was still privileged and protected, but they were expected to be present. King George VI and Queen Elizabeth visited bombed areas, troops, factories, Royal Air Force bases, naval ships, and training sites. These visits were designed to raise morale and show solidarity. Elizabeth watched this as a teenager. She was 13 when the war began. Like many children in Britain, she spent much of the war away from her parents for safety, mainly at Windsor Castle. In 1940, at 14, she gave a Children's Hour radio broadcast to evacuated children, urging them to have courage. More public duties followed. In 1942, she became colonel of the Grenadier Guards. On her 16th birthday, she inspected the guards at Windsor Castle. At 18, she launched HMS Vanguard at Clydebank. In 1944, while the king was in Italy, she performed some of his head of state duty. By the time she asked to join the ATS, Elizabeth had already learned that wartime monarchy was not only ceremony, it was visibility, repetition, and public confidence. The ATS was part of a much larger mobilization of women. From December 1941, unmarried women aged 20 to 30 could be conscripted in Britain. They could work on the land, interwar industry, or join one of the auxiliary services. As the war continued, more women were brought into the system. By June 1945, the ATS had around 200,000 members from across the British Empire. Its members worked as clerks, telephonists, drivers, postal workers, dispatch riders, ammunition inspectors, and anti-aircraft units. Women could track aircraft and aim anti-aircraft guns, but only men were allowed to fire them. Elizabeth entered this world in the final months of the war. She enrolled as a second subaltern and trained at the No. 1 Mechanical Transport Training Center. Newspapers and newsreels quickly understood the image. The heir presumptive to the throne in uniform, wearing overalls, working on engines, changing tires, and learning to drive army vehicles. The press called her Princess Auto Mechanic. The name was memorable, but the course had real requirements. Elizabeth worked 7 hours a day. She learned how to maintain vehicles, read maps, and drive heavy army transport. After 5 months, she was promoted to honorary junior commander, the equivalent of captain. To pass her final test, she drove a heavy vehicle alone from Camberley in Surrey to London. That detail keeps the story grounded. This was not combat service, and it did not make Elizabeth ordinary, but it did place the future queen inside a wartime system built around skill, discipline, and usefulness. The war ended before she could use those skills in a larger operational role. Even so, the ATS gave Britain a clear public image of Elizabeth, a young heir who wanted to contribute, not simply be protected. On May 8, 1945, Britain celebrated Victory in Europe Day, or VE Day. The war against Japan continued until August, but in Europe, Nazi Germany had surrendered. That day, King George VI broadcast to the nation. He asked people to remember those who had not survived to see victory. The royal family appeared on the balcony of Buckingham Palace as crowds filled the streets below. Later, Elizabeth was allowed to leave the palace and join the celebrations anonymously. She later recalled, "We asked my parents if we could go out and see for ourselves. I remember we were terrified of being recognized. I remember lines of unknown people linking arms and walking down Whitehall. All of us just swept along on a tide of happiness and relief." The importance of that night is not that Elizabeth became ordinary. She didn't. The importance is that she experienced the crowd from below. She saw how public feeling gathered around the crown after years of bombing, rationing, and loss. Victory did not end hardship. Rationing continued in Britain until 1954. In 1947, Princess Elizabeth used clothing ration coupons for the material for her wedding dress, and the government allowed her 200 extra coupons. That same year, she made the promise that defined her public life. On April 21st, 1947, during a royal tour of South Africa, she turned 21. Speaking from Cape Town, she said, "I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong. The imperial wording belongs to its time. India and Pakistan became independent later that year, and the world Elizabeth inherited was already changing. But the central word was service. By 1947, it was not an abstract idea. She had seen it in her parents' wartime conduct, in women's mobilization, in her ATS training, and in the public mood of VE Day. Elizabeth became queen in 1952, only 7 years after the war ended. Her first prime minister was Winston Churchill, the wartime leader who had stood with the royal family on the Buckingham Palace balcony in 1945. Her reign began in a country that had won the war but was still adjusting to its consequences. Britain was losing empire, rebuilding its economy, and entering a period of rapid social change. This is where a longer view helps extend the story. Elizabeth's reign lasted 70 years and 214 days. During that time, Britain changed from a post-war imperial power to a more diverse, less differential, and more media-driven society. Elizabeth's method was not to become a political personality. She spoke often, but usually in language designed to unite, rather than reveal. She rarely allowed her private opinions to become the story. That restraint can feel distant today, but for a constitutional monarch, distance is part of the function. A monarch who speaks too much becomes divisive. Elizabeth's role was to appear, listen, visit, read state papers, meet prime ministers, and continue. The pattern connects back to the war. During the Blitz, she saw that the monarch had to be visible in crisis. In the ATS, she learned that public symbolism was stronger when attached to practical effort. On VE Day, she saw how national feeling gathered around the crown. In 1947, she turned those lessons into a promise of lifelong service. That is why the story of Princess Elizabeth in the ATS still matters. It did not erase privilege, it did not make her a frontline soldier, it did not make her life ordinary, but it showed the standard she would later use to define herself. She wanted to serve. And for 70 years and 214 days, that became the central claim of her reign. He was the British royal family's most savage member. Not only did he have zero filter, but he once told a female parliament staffer in a red dress, "I'd get arrested if I unzipped that dress." Yet, at the same time, he was the love of Queen Elizabeth II's life, the longest reigning monarch in history. From a controversial exiled prince to a royal consort, how exactly did he win the heart of Elizabeth II? And as if being the queen's husband wasn't enough, rumors claim he was linked to at least 12 different women. That's right, today we're unpacking the life of the eccentric, alien-obsessed Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. June 10th, 1921, our protagonist, Little Philip, was born on the island of Corfu, Greece. But get this, he wasn't born in some fancy palace delivery room. He was born on a dining table. This chaotic debut was basically foreshadowed his destined, non-traditional royal life. Philip's father was Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark, and his mother, Prince Alice of Battenberg, was the great-granddaughter of Queen Victoria. Plus, his maternal grandfather was a German prince. Basically, Philip had the blood of half the royal families in Europe, the kind of noble lineage you usually only see in history books. But there was a catch. Greek politics at the time was messier than a reality show. The royal family and the government were beefing, and the monarchy was on the verge of collapse. So Philip's prince title was basically a limited time trial. Sure enough, just a year after he was born, life threw a major curveball. In 1922, after Greece got wrecked in the war with Turkey, his dad was blamed as a scapegoat and accused of treason. He was literally about to be executed. Luckily, his cousin, King George V of the UK, stepped in and sent a warship to save him. So, at just 18 months old, Philip was stuffed into an orange crate and whisked away on an exile adventure. They didn't go to London though. They moved to Paris. Why? because Britain didn't want the drama of hosting the entire Greek royal family. It would have been a diplomatic nightmare. So they kept it low-key, moved in with the relatives in France, switching from royal to civilian mode. But those quiet days didn't last. The family fell apart. His dad left, his mom was institutionalized for mental health issues, and his sisters all married into German nobility. As the only boy, Philip was shipped off to a school in the UK and lost touch with everyone. How much did this affect him? In a later interview, when asked what language they spoke at home, he paused and asked, "What do you mean by at home?" That line hits hard. It perfectly captures the loneliness and the identity crisis of his childhood. Philip's childhood was a mess, but he didn't just quite quit. He used those years of exile as his hero origin story. After high school, he joined the Britannia Royal Naval College and graduated top of his class. This wasn't just for the degree. It was his way of building a new identity, from an exiled prince to a future naval officer. And that's exactly where he met the woman who changed everything, the future Queen of England, Elizabeth Alexandra Mary. In 1939, a 13-year-old Princess Elizabeth was visiting the college with her parents. Her host? Her 18-year-old distant cousin, Philip. Word is, Elizabeth was instantly smitten by this tall, blonde, six-pack abs hunk. She basically added him to her cart on the spot and told her dad he was the only man she could ever love. It wasn't an immediate happily ever after. World War II broke out, and Philip was sent to the front. They kept the flame alive through letters, ultimate long-distance relationship goal. Imagine Philip dodging shells while writing "Thinking of You," and Elizabeth's letters being his only comfort in the war. After the war, Philip returned from the Pacific and proposed at Balmoral Castle. He later said that surviving the war and falling in love made all the world's problems seem small and petty. But then came the hurdles. Philip had the title, but he was basically a broke prince with no kingdom. Plus, his sisters were married to Germans, which was a huge red flag in post-war Britain. King George VI was not a fan of the match, but Philip didn't back down. To marry Elizabeth, he gave up his Greek and Danish titles, converted religions, and became a British citizen. He even ditched his family's name for his mom's British name, Mountbatten. He literally rebooted his entire life just to be with her. If that's not what true love is, what is? Finally, in 1947, the king gave in. Philip even quit smoking for her on their wedding day. But the sacrifices didn't stop there. In 1952, Elizabeth became queen. Philip expected to share the glory, but he got hit with the surname drama. Prime Minister Churchill insisted the royal family stay Windsor, meaning Philip's name, Mountbatten, would be erased from the lineage. Philip was crushed. He famously complained, "I am the only man in the country not allowed to give his name to his own children. I am nothing but a bloody amoeba." It wasn't until 1960 that a compromise was reached with the Mountbatten Windsor name. Throughout their marriage, Philip was the one who kept the queen grounded and laughing. He was famous for his savage humor and for always telling her the truth. They used to write Lilibet letters to each other, with Philip calling her the only absolutely real thing in his world. In 2003, he even dressed up as a palace guard just to prank her during an inspection. That kind of playfulness is probably how they stayed together for 73 years. When people think of Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth, the phrase fairy tale couple usually comes to mind. Their 73-year marriage made them the ultimate blueprint for modern royal romance. But in reality, Philip's life was shadowed by a non-stop parade of rumors. It's said he was linked to at least 12 different women, while Buckingham Palace was always quick to shut them down, claiming, "There's nothing to see here." These stories became permanent fixtures in the royal gossip history. Today, we're counting down some of Prince Philip's most famous close confidants. In post-World War II London, everyone was ready to party. Young, handsome, and fit, Prince Philip was essentially walking pheromones at every event. He belonged to a group of male friends the media dubbed the Gossip Gang, and they were regulars at the city's nightclub. Philip's most notorious link during this time was nightclub star Pat Kirkwood. Reports say Philip once drove her to a club in his sports car where they danced cheek to cheek until dawn. While Kirkwood hated being labeled as Philip's mistress, her comments to reporters suggested their bond wasn't exactly simple. She once said, "I would have had a happier and easier life if Prince Philip, instead of coming uninvited into my dressing room, had gone home to his pregnant wife on the night in question." She also added, "I suspect he felt trapped and rarely got a chance to be himself. I think I got off on the right foot because I made him laugh." The gossip rags ate this up, interpreting it as Philip can only drop the royal consort mask and truly relax when he's with me. This scandal kicked off decades of rumored infidelity. The second lady on our list might actually shock you because she was practically family. That's right, we're talking about Susan Barantes, the mother of Sarah Ferguson, who was married to Philip's son, Prince Andrew. Yes, his own son's mother-in-law. This bombshell came from biographer Andrew Lowney, who shares a name with Philip's son, but he's the author, so don't get them mixed up. In his book, The Rise and Fall of the House of York, he revealed that Philip and Susan were secret lovers. Supposedly, the affair started because Susan's husband, Ronald, was cheating, which drove her closer to Philip. Many skeptics think this rumor is baseless, especially since Lowney's book dropped in 2025, long after both Philip and Susan had passed away and couldn't defend themselves. However, Lowney swears by his source, his wife, Angela, who grew up as a neighbor to Susan's husband's family and heard the story firsthand. Even wilder, Susan's cheating husband actually wrote in his 1994 memoir, The Galloping Major, "I always suspected that Prince Philip had an eye for Susie. Certainly, they remain friends to this day." Talk about a plot twist! When the husband himself jumps into the gossip pool, it definitely adds a buff to the rumor's credibility. But if we're talking about the most sensational rumor of all, we have to mention Helen Cordet. This is the one where Philip was accused of having secret love children. Helen was a beautiful Greek cabaret singer and a nightlife companion of Philip's in their younger years. In the late 1950s, after separating from her husband, Helen had 2 children, but refused to name the father. Meanwhile, our dear Prince Philip just happened to be the godfather to both kids. Beyond that, it was leaked that Philip helped pay for their private schooling and even bought Helen a house in London. Naturally, the public went wild, speculating that Philip was the biological father. I mean, who else is that generous for no reason? Philip denied it, of course, but the image of the prince playing the royal consort by day and secret dad by night was enough to keep the tabs printing for years. The final woman we're discussing is often called the second most important woman in the Duke of Edinburgh's life and his keeper of secrets, Penny Knatchbull, who was 30 years his junior. Philip and Penny bonded over their shared love for carriage driving. They were frequently seen together at the Royal Windsor Horse Show, and Philip even gave her rides on his motorcycle. Isn't the backseat of a bike usually reserved for the girlfriend? When Philip retired to Sandringham House in 2017, Penny visited him privately and remained one of his closest companions in his final years. Even crazier, in 2019, after Philip got into a car accident, the Queen reportedly summoned Penny to convince him to give up his driver's license. And he actually listened. Wait, what's going on here? Did the Queen really think he'd listen to Penny more than her? It gets better. Because they were so inseparable, Penny earned the nickname and also. Why? Because whenever a guest list was being made for a royal event, private or public, and someone said, "Let's invite X and Y," Philip would inevitably insist, and also Penny. When Philip passed away, only 30 guests were invited to his funeral due to restrictions. Penny wasn't just one of those 30. she was the only non-royal in attendance. That tells you everything you need to know about her place in his heart. While most believe this was a soulmate-level friendship rather than a physical affair, a close friendship lasting decades like that definitely makes you wonder. Did those stories ruin Philip's image for you? Well, hold on, because I've got more. If hellish gags could actually send you to hell, Philip would be on the 18th floor. Despite being the British prince consort, he had a notorious habit of saying the absolute wrong thing at formal events. For example, he once asked an Aboriginal Australian performer, "Do you still throw spears at each other?" This caused an immediate uproar. People saw it as incredibly racist because it reduced a rich culture to a savage stereotype. In reality, spears carry deep historical and ceremonial significance for the indigenous Australians, but Philip turned a cultural symbol into a punchline. Though, to be fair, one of the performers later tried to defend him, saying the media took the comment out of context. But these disaster-class gaffes were a regular occurrence for him. During a 1986 visit to China, he described Beijing as ghastly and told British students there, "If you stay here much longer, you'll all be slitty-eyed." Slitty-eyed is a derogatory trope historically used by Westerners to mock Asians, if you didn't know. It doesn't just make fun of physical features, it carries connotations of being shifty or untrustworthy. His comment only deepened those negative stereotypes. He didn't stop there. He also made a hellish joke about Cantonese eating habits. If it has 4 legs and is not a chair, has wings and is not an airplane, or swims and is not a submarine, the Cantonese will eat it. This played right into the Western stereotype that Chinese food culture is uncivilized and they eat anything that moves. In 1998, he asked a British trekker who had just returned from Papua New Guinea, "You managed to not get eaten then?" This was beyond the pale. While cannibalism existed in that region's distant history, it's long gone. Philip was essentially living in a different century. Beyond the racial jokes, his comments about women were also a no-go. He once said, "I don't think a prostitute is more moral than a wife, but they are doing the same thing." Excuse me, sir? What are we even saying? He not only compared wives to prostitutes in a sexual context, but implied there was no moral difference between the two. Where's the respect for the queen? In 1984, he asked a woman in Kenya, "You are a woman, aren't you?" In 1988, looking at the house plans for the Duke and Duchess of York, he remarked, "It looks like a tart's bedroom." Tart is British slang for a prostitute. I guess we can see what you're thinking about because Philip sure had prostitutes on the brain a lot. But in 1992, he told a female parley employee in a red dress, "I would get arrested if I unzipped that dress." Listening to these politically incorrect comments makes you break into a sweat just hearing them. And Philip's sharp tongue didn't spare his own son, Charles. Perhaps because Philip survived a wandering, unstable childhood, he wanted Charles to be tough, no crying, no complaining. But Charles was a bit more sensitive. Philip constantly told him to man up, which planted the seeds for their strained relationship. How strict was Prince Philip as a father? Having never had a traditional father figure himself, he treated parenting like a prince-building laboratory. Since there was no manual, he tried every formula he could think of and ended up with sons who were nothing like what he imagined. His eldest, Charles, was his first lab rat. As mentioned, Philip wanted Charles to be manly because he saw him as timid and weak. As a naval officer, Philip believed strict discipline built character, so he took the sensitive, art-loving Charles and threw him into the Devil's Boot Camp, Gordonston School. Charles later described it as Colditz in kilts. Colditz was a famous Nazi prisoner of war camp. He felt like a prisoner forced to walk around in kilt uniforms under extreme control. Charles was miserable there, bullied and beaten to tears by his classmates. Even after graduating from the prisoner of war camp, Charles never became the alpha male Philip wanted. Philip's assessment of him remained brutal. He called him precious, extravagant, and lacking in dedication to make a good king. Ouch. Worst of all, Charles revealed in a biography that Philip used to humiliate him in public with mocking banter that brought him to tears, especially at social gatherings. To survive this toxic environment, Charles' strategy was to disengage. Journalist Graham Turner wrote that Charles was often absent from family affairs because his father simply wouldn't let him participate. Charles deals with it by disengaging. That is why he doesn't play a bigger role in family affairs. His father often doesn't let him get a good look in. These experiences created a Charles who was indecisive and prone to avoiding conflict, traits he later brought into his marriage with Princess Diana. When things got tough, he froze up, which eventually pushed the marriage toward its tragic end. While he was iron-fisted with his eldest, Philip was incredibly indulgent with his second son, Andrew. Andrew was a lot like him, confident, outgoing, and adventurous. He joined the Royal Navy and became a helicopter pilot. Maybe Philip saw his younger self in Andrew, or maybe Andrew just fit the tough guy mold Philip admired. Whatever the reason, they were very close, but that indulgence had a dark side. Andrew grew up wrong. In 2008, Andrew's financier friend, Jeffrey Epstein, was charged with child sex abuse and soliciting minors. In 2014, Virginia Giuffre publicly accused Epstein of selling her to Prince Andrew when she was just 17. She claimed she was forced to have sex with him and was too afraid to resist because of Epstein's threats. She noted the incidents happened in London, New York, and the private island. She even provided a 2001 photo as evidence showing Andrew with his arm around her alongside Epstein's associate, Ghislaine Maxwell. The scandal dealt a massive blow to the royal family's reputation. To save the monarchy's image, Philip had to pull the plug. He personally advised the Queen to strip Andrew of all his royal titles. The unlimited favor mode was officially over. Finally, there's the youngest, Prince Edward. After the first two, Philip finally found a balance between extreme strictness and extreme indulgence. Though he was initially disappointed when Edward dropped out of military training, over time he saw that Edward stayed out of trouble, avoided scandals, and quietly did his royal duties. Philip eventually seemed to think, okay, you're a good kid, you pass. Strictly speaking, Edward is the only son who didn't turn out wrong in the end. April 9, 2021, the morning at Windsor Castle was incredibly quiet. After heart surgery and months in the hospital, Prince Philip chose to go home to spend his final moments with the Queen. He passed away peacefully, like finishing a 99-year mission and signing off in style. At noon, Buckingham Palace announced the news. It is with deep sorrow that Her Majesty the Queen announces the death of her beloved husband. The whole country hit pause. Flags went to half-mast and the UK entered an 8-day mourning period. True to his character, Philip wanted a low-key funeral. No drama, no extravagance. Only 30 family members attended due to the pandemic. His coffin was carried on a custom green Land Rover he helped design himself. Total main character energy for his final exit. Looking back, whether he was a tough naval officer, a devoted royal consort, or the king of roasts, he lived every role to the fullest. His story isn't just royal history, it's a story about family, duty, and sacrifice. As the Queen said, he has been my strength and stay. His passing ended an era and a 73-year love story, but he definitely left his mark on the world. And that's a wrap for today. Let us know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell icon, and smash that like button. Share this with your history-loving friends, and we'll see you in the next one. King Charles III might be happily married now, but did you know his ex-wife is the one the British people truly call the People's Princess? Her life was a legend, a fairy tale wedding that turned into a nightmare of infidelity and mental health struggles, ending in a tragic high-speed paparazzi chase and a fatal crash. The whole world loved her. Over 3.5 billion people tuned in for her funeral. Even the Queen adored her. So much so that she reportedly took a subtle revenge when Charles remarried his mistress. This is the story of Diana, Princess of Wales. Despite being loved by everyone else, she could never win the heart of her husband. What went wrong? Who was the third person, and why, 26 years later, is the world still obsessed with her? Today, we're diving deep into the legendary life of Princess Diana. Because of her down-to-earth image, many people think Diana was a commoner who hit the royal lottery, a real-life Cinderella story. But actually, she was far from it. She came from the Spencer, a legendary aristocratic family that has been tight with the royals since the 15th century. Diana grew up on the Sandringham estate, which her parents rented from Queen Elizabeth II herself. Since the royals vacationed there often, little Diana actually played with the Prince Andrew and Prince Edward as a child. But while she seemed warm and full of love, her own childhood was anything but. Her parents' marriage was cold and toxic. In an interview, she even recalled the trauma of watching her father slap her mother. School wasn't really Diana's thing. Her grades were pretty rough, and she crushed it in dance, music, and swimming. Her kind personality made her super popular though. At 19, her parents bought her an apartment in Kensington. She lived there with friends, sharing clothes, and living off cereal and chocolate. It was a total vibe. She was working too, teaching at a kindergarten on MWF and nannying for her upper-class families. This actually made her the only royal to ever have worked a normal job. She was living her best life and thought it would stay that way until one man changed everything. He turned this kindergarten teacher into the people's princess. That man was Prince Charles. It all started in 1977. A 16-year-old Diana met Charles, but back then, 29-year-old Charles, yep, that age gap is real, was actually dating her older sister, Sarah Spencer. Talk about awkward. I bet he had no idea he'd end up marrying his girlfriend's little sister. In 1979, they crossed paths again. Charles had just lost his great uncle due to an assassination and was grieving. Diana, being the empathetic person she was, told him, "You must be so lonely." Apparently, that hit Charles hard, and he supposedly pulled her in for a kiss right then and there. That's when the dating started. 19-year-old Diana was swept off her feet by a man 13 years older. After only 13 dates, they decided to get married. On July 29, 1981, they had their wedding of the century. At just 20, Diana became a princess, and her life was never the same. But if you think this was a fairy tale, think again. Charles might have thought Diana was the perfect princess, but that didn't mean he loved her. The cracks showed almost immediately, and then came the bombshell, the cheating. On November 20th, 1995, the BBC aired that explosive interview with Princess Diana. 23 million people watched her get real about royal life, her marriage, and her mental health. But the quote that broke the internet was,
"Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded."
"There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." She was talking about Charles's affair. Diana felt like an outsider in her own marriage, and that third person was none other than Camilla Parker Bowles, now Queen Camilla. When Diana confronted Charles, he reportedly said, "I refuse to be the only Prince of Wales who's never had a mistress."
My husband, why this lady around? And he said, well, I refuse to be the Prince of Wales and never had a mistress.
Ouch. They officially separated in 1993. Then came Camilla Gate, or Tampon Gate. A leaked phone call from 1989 revealed a very explicit conversation between Charles and Camilla. You want to know why it's called Tampon Gate? Well, here's a snippet. Charles said, "Oh God, I'll just live inside your trousers or something. It would be much easier." And Camilla laughed. "What are you going to turn into? A pair of knickers?" Charles said, "God forbid, a Tampax, just my luck." The leaked tape confirmed everything Diana had said about his infidelity and absolutely tanked Charles's reputation with the public. On August 28, 1996, the divorce was finalized. Diana kept the title Princess of Wales, but lost her Royal Highness status. The nightmare was finally over. 1 year later, on August 30th, 1997, Diana and her boyfriend, Dodi Fayed, landed in Paris. Paparazzi were everywhere. While being chased by photographers through the Pont d'Alma tunnel, their Mercedes crashed into a pillar. Diana, just as she was finally finding her freedom, died in that crash. The world was in shock, especially when it came out that the paparazzi were taking photos of the wreckage instead of helping. Britain was devastated. Buckingham Palace was buried in flowers. 750,000 people waited in line for hours just to pay their respects. Even though she was technically no longer a royal highness, the entire country went into mourning. It showed just how much she meant to people. But what made her so special? Why did the world love her so much? One of the most beloved things about Diana was her modern approach to parenting. She broke the royal tradition by taking William and Henry on subways and buses and letting them wear jeans and baseball caps. She wanted them to have a real childhood and see the world as it really was. She once said, "Family is the most important thing in the world." They even had a Saturday tradition, grabbing McDonald's, Big Macs, and fries to eat at the palace while watching blind date shows on TV. Diana became people's princess because she truly cared. In 1997, she auctioned off 79 of her iconic dresses at Christie's, raising $3.4 million for cancer and AIDS charity. But it wasn't just about the money. In 1987, she visited an AIDS ward in London and did something that shocked the world. She shook hands with a patient without wearing gloves. Back then, there was so much fear and stigma around HIV, AIDS. People thought you could just catch it by touching someone. Diana proved them wrong. She said HIV does not make people dangerous to know, so you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it. That one simple gesture changed the global conversation and won her the respect of millions. Diana's popularity wasn't just about her charm. It was about her guts to challenge the royal status quo. You know how the royals have million strict rules like royal ladies don't run in public? Well, Diana didn't care. She famously kicked off her heels and ran barefoot at her son's school sports day just to win a race for them. That's pure mom energy right there. But if we're talking about rule breaking, we have to talk about the iconic revenge dress. In Queen Elizabeth's book, black was for funerals only. Wearing it to a party was a huge no-no. But in June 1994, on the exact night Prince Charles publicly admitted to his affair, Diana stepped out in a stunning, skin-tight black mini dress. She paired it with a massive sapphire necklace and, get this, bright red nail polish, which was totally against protocol. This look wasn't just for fashion, it was a huge middle finger to the royal family. It was so bold that the world dubbed it the revenge dress. Just how much did the world love Diana? Enough to make the Queen break centuries of British tradition. When Diana passed in 1997, the grief was unlike anything we'd ever seen. People flooded London, leaving a literal ocean of flowers and letters at the palace gates. It felt like everyone had lost their best friend. But there was a problem. Since Diana and Charles were divorced, the Queen technically didn't have to say anything according to protocol. Plus, while the rest of London had their flags at half-mast, the flagpole at Buckingham Palace was empty. The media called it cold, and public anger started to boil over. You see, royal tradition said that flag only flies when the monarch is in the building, and it's never lowered for anyone. But the people didn't care about tradition. They wanted respect for their princess. Finally, the Queen did the unthinkable. She broke 300 years of tradition. She gave a televised speech, and in the first time in history, the Union Jack was flown at half-mast over Buckingham Palace. It was a massive win for the people and a testament to Diana's legacy. In her speech, the Queen said, "I admired and respected her, especially for her devotion to her two sons." After everything you've heard, you might think King Charles and Camilla are just the villains in the fairy tale, but is that the whole story? If we're being real, Charles and Diana were just a bad match. Charles was a Cambridge-educated academic who loved polo and philosophy. Diana, she hated books, she hated riding horses, and was all about dancing, music, and pop culture. There's a heartbreaking story from when Diana was 4 months pregnant with William. Desperate for Charles's attention, she threatened to throw herself down the stairs. Charles reportedly just said, "You always do this to me," and walked out to go riding. Diana actually did jump, but Charles just ignored her and went on with his day. Cold, right? Now, look at Camilla. She was Charles's true soulmate. They met at a polo match when they were in their 20s. Camilla was warm, funny, and most importantly, she listened to him. To Charles, she was the only one who truly understood the pressure of being a prince. He even said, "In this whole world, Camilla is my best friend." But their timing was was terrible. Charles went off for his naval career, and Camilla ended up marrying someone else. They were star-crossed lovers who spent the next few decades trying to find their way back to each other. Diana famously said there were 3 people in her marriage, but if we're being honest, it was even more crowded than that. Charles wasn't the only one stepping out. Diana had her own affairs too. She admitted in a TV interview that at 24, she fell deeply in love with her bodyguard, Barry Manikin. She was miserable in her marriage and found comfort in him, even dreaming of eloping. But when the palace found out, they reassigned him immediately. Tragically, just 3 weeks later, he died in a motorcycle crash. Diana called it the biggest blow of her life. Later, she had a 3-year affair with her riding instructor, James Hewitt. There are even wild rumors that Hewitt was Prince Harry's real father, though Hewitt denied this since they met after Harry was born. Hewitt eventually betrayed her, selling her private letters and writing a tell-all book just to make a quick buck. So yeah, crowded was definitely an understatement. This marriage was a mess on both sides. So what did the Queen think about all this? Initially, Queen Elizabeth II was a fan. She approved of the marriage and trusted Diana, even sending her to represent the family at Prince Grace of Monaco's funeral. But the Queen definitely overestimated how well Diana would handle royal life. The pressure and the toxic marriage took a massive toll on Diana's mental health. The Queen tried to mediate, but you can't fix a broken heart with royal protocol. As things got colder between the couple, Diana started skipping official events without asking, and her relationship with the Queen soured. Eventually, the Queen sent the letter that ended it all. The best decision is to divorce. And what about Charles and Camilla? They finally tied the knot in 2005. The Queen skipped the civil ceremony but attended the prayer service. And here's the tea. The Queen showed up wearing all white, while the bride, Camilla, wore gray. The internet lost its mind. Some think the Queen wore white as a tribute to Diana, who famously wore white at her own wedding. Others pointed to something Meghan Markle later said, that you can never wear the same color as the Queen at a group event. So by wearing white, was the Queen low-key banning Camilla from wearing the traditional bridal color? We'll never know for sure, but it definitely was a move. Diana married into the royals as a young, naive girl and suffered through a marriage that was anything but a fairy tale. Her ending was tragic, but her legacy as the people's princess is untouchable. Even decades later, the world is still captivated by her. What do you think about Diana's legendary story? Do you think Charles ever really loved her? Let me know in the comments.